The hero of Central Park, Squirrel Girl, is a ranged DPS controller in Marvel Rivals. Squirrel Girl is an explosive damage dealer who lobs bouncing projectiles to deal damage to enemies in large areas. Even if she misses her shot, you still take the full amount of damage if you're in the radius of the nut explosion. This gives her an amazing ability to control areas and stop enemies from entering into specific zones. She's able to lock down enemies and make the general area unsafe for people to be able to move through. Played best in tight maps with good chokeholds, Squirrel Girl can be absolutely devastating into the enemy team and is often the highest damage dealer on her squad. We're gonna have to look at her abilities to figure out why. Don't forget, if you're liking anything you're seeing in this video, hit that like button, and if you want to see more, hit subscribe. Starting off, her basic attack is Burst Acorn. This is a 10 ammunition basic attack that lobs an acorn towards the target at a slight arc. If the acorn hits a surface, it will do a single bounce before then detonating the next time it hits a surface. And the detonation zone will deal damage to anybody within its area. So if you know enemies are needing to funnel through a choke point, you can easily lob arrows against a wall, which will bounce into that choke point and do damage to anybody coming through. You don't need your attack to land directly on the target, and you can generally make an area that will be difficult for enemies to move through. To make sure your shots hit on the target, it's usually best to try and aim downwards at the feet of the target, so there's a quick bounce before the explosion hits and deals damage to the target. If you try and lob towards player heads, you're going to often find you'll miss the target, and then the bounce will happen behind the target, and your final explosion will happen a distance away. It's much better control to try and have the bounce occur and the second part of the bounce be where the enemy target is at. That way, even if you miss, the explosions should still hit them. To facilitate this, you're going to spend a lot of time jumping around, and you're going to be jumping and aiming downwards towards enemies, so your bouncing shot bounces off the ground and hits that hit. To accommodate this is your left shift, tail bounce. Activating this will bounce her up into the air and give her quite a bit of vantage point on enemies in the area. This is a good escape metric for when enemies get on top of you, allowing you to bounce up and out of their reach and possibly onto a higher location, but it also gives you a good vantage point to be able to shoot shots downwards and bounce them into the enemy team. The extra height gets you some extra distance on that bounce attack and can make it deal a lot of damage a far distance away. Her secondary fire, Squirrel Blockade, is a charge-up attack that when you activate, you'll begin charging up a large acorn above your head. You can charge this up or instantly release it, at which point you will throw out an acorn, which will hit targets, damage them, and put a root on them for a short period. Rooted enemies are not able to move and are susceptible to an incoming secondary shot that they're not going to be able to avoid. A quick tap of this ability is going to lob out a very slow acorn that's easy to dodge, but fires out from you rather quickly. For a fully charged up version, it is more obvious that it's coming, but the acorn moves a lot faster. The acorn will bounce multiple times, so if you don't land it immediately on a target, it will bounce around and possibly off of objects and come backwards. It can be a great idea to try and charge this up and lob it towards enemies, making sure that there's a wall behind them, which will make it so if you miss, it'll hit the wall and come back at them from behind. You should always immediately follow this root attack up with an acorn directly at where you're aiming. If the root lands, the acorn is going to explode on that target immediately and do a huge chunk of damage. Any out of position or damaged enemy is a great target to hit with this root. If you're able to root a player down and stop them from being able to get to safety, it can be a lot easier for your team to be able to take them out, and it's one of the most useful abilities in Squirrel Girl's kit. Mammal Bond is her E ability. Activating this is going to instantly reload your basic attacks, as well as allow you to activate one of your abilities that's currently on cooldown. So if you've lobbed out one of your acorns, you can use this E button to instantly get it again and lob out a second acorn. This is actually a pretty devastating combo, and if you're able to execute it well, can really stop an enemy team. A successful rooted acorn followed up by a basic attack, E reload, and then a second rooted acorn can lock an enemy down for a long period of time. Squirrel Girl's ultimate is the unbeatable Squirrel Tsunami. Activating this, you will activate a blue arrow in front of you. A reconfirmation will then shoot out a Squirrel Tsunami. This is a targetable creature that will run straight forward and damage any enemies in its path. Upon hitting a wall, it will ricochet off and move towards the nearest enemy. And it'll continue bouncing off of walls and chasing down targets for several seconds. This ability can be really devastating. If you're in a tight choke point against your enemy team and you've rooted a target down, shooting the Squirrel Tsunami at an angle down the choke point will cause the squirrels to bounce back and forth down the hallway and chunk enemies for significant damage. 2 quick taps from these squirrels will do enough damage to kill most supports and duelists, and if you're managing to get it in a wall position, every wall bounce immediately resets the damage they can do. So it can hit a target, hit the wall, and hit the target again in just a fraction of a second, killing the target instantly. The Squirrel Tsunami does have HP, and if the enemies are able to get their curses on it, they're able to take it out before it does too much damage. This means you're going to want to use it in hectic moments when enemies aren't immediately ready to turn to it. Just shooting the squirrels directly at the enemy team when you're facing off is going to allow the enemies to just shoot it down and stop it from dealing any damage. Alright, playing as Squirrel Girl, you want to be ready to be lobbing acorns down at your enemy team along whatever path they're coming down. Keep yourself moving and constantly lob acorns that are going to detonate at the area that you expect enemies to be at shortly. Move back and forth and keep yourself regularly reloaded. Shoot 2 or 3 shots off and then reload unless you see an opening to get a kill. You don't want to enter into a major conflict at midway through your ammunition, causing you to need to reload partway through. Wind up an acorn whenever you feel ready and hurl it at the enemy team, trying to get yourself a root. A rooted enemy standing still is going to take a lot of damage from your team. You're mostly going to want to save your bounce for any point that an enemy has gotten onto you and started to deal damage within melee range. Or if there's a vantage point that you need to get yourself up to be able to get a better angle at your enemies. It's going to be very rare that you alone kill a target. Your damage is rather slow, and the 3 shots from your slingshot take quite a bit of time. But your basic attack deals a whopping amount of damage, and you can take advantage of allies that have managed to hit a target. Or you can be a great softening mechanism, softening up the enemy team for your sniper or long-range characters to quickly take out the enemies. Once you get practice at Squirrel Girl, it shouldn't be very often that you miss dealing your damage. Your bounce shot should be really reliable, and you should be able to get that bounce into detonation on targets as long as they haven't used a movement ability to get out of it. This is going to leave you dealing a lot of damage to the enemy team and leaving their strategists worn rather thin. Squirrel Girl can work really well with strong divers. They're able to take advantage of the fact that she's constantly dealing damage to the enemy team and weakening the enemy strategist's focus. You're going to struggle up against divers. Because of your bounce shot, it's actually rather difficult to successfully get damage on a target that's really close by. You're going to have to land them immediately with one of your acorns or do a quick shot off of the wall. If a diver gets onto you, it's a good idea to get close to a wall and then to be shooting at the wall so the acorn bounces off of the wall and detonates at your feet. This is going to cause any enemy immediately on top of you to take that chunk of damage, and you're just bouncing around and using your tail jump to constantly get yourself some mobility and stay unpredictable. With this guide, you have a better understanding of how to play Squirrel Girl, and you're going to be able to use your Squirrel Tsunami to decimate the enemy team. In the next guide, we're going to talk about Iron Fist. Iron Fist has gone through a lot of changes in the game, and right now, he's a tank killer. We're going to be looking at his ability to melt down enemy vanguards. We'll talk about all that next time.
Sazaze.